If you just installed the update for the ATR 42600 or 72600, then you might need to change your calibration for the throttle of your joystick. In this video, we're gonna look at the detailed steps how to do it. But first, let's roll the intro. So let's have a look how we can set up the throttle. The first thing you need to do is go to the options menu in the electronic flight bag and then press the throttle setup. So the throttle setup has a few options. You need to start at the top where you can define if you're using a single axis or dual axis. And that again depends on the joystick which you're using. If you've got only one, I would say a button, or I would say a leveler which controls the throttle, then make sure that you're selecting single axis. If you've got multiple throttles, then you can still leave it to single axis, but you can also switch it to dual axis, but that depends on your controller configuration. So in my case, I've got the velocity one. So if we go back to the controls options, you can see that the velocity one has the yoke twin engine jet configured and the quad twin engine jet, which means that these two levelers are used to control the engines. Now, if you would switch it to the single engine option, then this one, the black one, will be used for trolling purposes, and then you would need to leave the option in the electronic flight bag set to that single mode. So in my case, I'm going to use these two for throttling, so that's fine. We go back to the aircraft and we'll switch it to dual axis. If you do that, you will see that those set buttons will become active for engine number 2, because you can now control those engines individually, which makes it, I would say, pretty nice. Once you've done that, then it's time to figure out, hey, do I want to use the throttle hardware with reverser axis? So reverser axis is that you can push the throttles back, which will, I'd say, turn the engines in reverse mode, right? Which will make it possible to, let's say, push back the aircraft or I'd say drive backwards with the aircraft. Not sure if that's the correct wording, but I hope you know what I mean. So if we look at the control options over here, we can see that by default, the throttles are set to reverse mode. And this is something which you need to, I would say, take into account, that you might need to adjust your throttles, and you can do that by simply adjusting them. And then I'd say putting them in the right position. And then I'd say saying, okay, hey, this is the zero mode, right? If you don't do that, it will not work correctly. So if you would push them here, right? In my case, if I now would look at my joystick, they're almost at, I would say, half the way of the maximum, which isn't the way I want it, right? Because I want to simply be, I would say, now they're in idle mode. So this should be the start mode, which they should be in. Once you figure that out, you can press the set options, which will set them to the default mode. In my case, I'm gonna disable the reverse axis because the reverse axis, I would say, although it's possible with the velocity one, it does not always work 100% correctly. So I'm gonna switch it off for now. Then the next thing is that you need to put them in the other options, right? So the other options are the idle mode we just had. We have the notch option and the ramp option. So if you look at the description next to this, I would say nice, I would say, what is it? Skill, I would say it. There you can see I can put the throttles in multiple positions. But here starts the problem, right? If you're familiar with the ATR, you probably know what the issue is. If you don't know, as I did, I would say initially, while I first used this aircraft, the thing is you need to remove the gust lock, because if you don't remove the gust lock, it will act weird, right? So you can see I can now push it to the maximum, but I can also move it back into the position where I want it. So in my case, so you can see that it's pretty sensitive, right? So always would say a little bit play around to make sure that the let's say throttles are in the same position, because else it will act a little bit weird. So once you've done that, right, you can set the ramp ones, for example, to this position. And you can see that there's a difference, right? Which means that in this case, they're not 100% equally set on the joystick. So you can still play around, but you can, I would say it's kind of sensitive, if you ask me. But hey, let's try it again. So here we go. We put them in this position and then hit the option, and then you can see it's almost the same, right? You can play around with it a bit until you're 100% perfectly aligned. This is what you can do, and you can see that you also can change the tolerance for these options over there. Then we've got the notch option, and the notch option, I do think that it's this position. If it's different, then let me know. But I do think that it's this position. So playing around again with the throttles, right, to make sure that they're aligned. So once you're happy with that, like this, then press the set options again, right? And then you will see that there still is a difference. But that again depends on the joystick. So idle it should be, idly it should be in the same value. But in some cases, the joystick is very sensitive, which would make it a nightmare to get them equal. So what I always do is try to put my hands on it, and then based on that, try to figure out, hey, are they in a good position, yes or no? Once you've done that, you can click on the validate button, and that will show validation successful. If it says failed, then please perform the steps again, right? Because then it likely doesn't work. So once you've done that, right, you can start flying around with this aircraft. So pretty cool, right? You can now move the positions, and although you see that I would say that they're in a wrong position, you can see that if I move my joystick, although you can't see it because there's no webcam on the joystick, that I can now move it into the correct position and make sure that it's aligned correctly. Depending on the joystick you're using, this could be something which I would say could cause some troubles. So be aware of that. Now, if you would say, okay, hey, I completely messed up the configuration, then there's a good option which is called the defaults option, which always restores the values back to the normal value, which is good because then you don't need to, let's say, worry about that you messed up the configuration. So in my case, I can redo everything if I want, right? Putting it to the default options, then moving it to the notch options, etc., until I'm happy. Press validate again, press OK, and then you can fly with this nice ATR aircraft. So here in this video where we looked at how to set up the joystick. If you get issues with it, then feel free to reach out to me by leaving a comment in the comment box below. I know it was maybe a little bit unstructured in some cases, but there are a few things which I want to recap. So the first thing you need to do is go to the controls options, make sure that your setup is correctly, in my case, the yoke twin engine jet for the Velocity 1. Once you've done that, go back to the menu, either choose single axis or dual axis. Single axis if you want to use one leveler for increasing and decreasing throttling. Dual axis if you want to use two levelers. Then validate if you want to use the reverser axis. If not, then switch it off because it's switched off by default. Or switched on by default, I should say. And then go to all these positions and make sure that you do this calibration correctly. And then you can start flying the ATR aircraft. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. If you got questions again, feel free to reach out via the comment box below. And I hope to see you back next time for the next video, likely about the ATR.